Hey YouTube, so it's Wednesday the 15th of April and we got a little snow last night. It looks like it's a little sunny today, but it's only in the low 20s and we are supposed to get snow tomorrow and the next day from what I saw. It's not a lot of snow, it's just a dusting. It's just the point that it's cold. Hey YouTube, so it's Thursday now, Thursday morning, April 16th. We had 1.5 inches of snow last night. This is normal for this area. What's not normal is to have all those warm temperatures we have. April 16th, Thursday. Hey YouTube, so it's Friday now, and you can see that most of the snow or all of the snow has melted that we had, but it's snowing flurries right now. Now here's the thing, 30 degrees or 32 degrees. It was 26 or 23 this morning when I woke up early. I think it was 5 o'clock, so it was 23 degrees. The ground is frozen enough for this. And we're supposed to get 4 inches, so we'll see what happens. But today I'm going to make a video about why I cut from the small end of the log, and I just want to explain it, I think, in a thorough manner so that everybody gets to understand this. And the guys who don't cut from the small end, I'm not complaining about, you know, which way you cut. I don't care how you cut, but I just want to explain it. So I'm going to do that as soon as I get out there. Okay guys, so you can see I got rid of my flitches that I had on there. I got some fresh snow falling, and there's still snow on that pile from the other day. And I have a log up here. I'm not going to cut this because of the snow we're supposed to be getting. I have to go do some other things later. But what I do want to do is I just want to show a little something here when it comes to cutting these logs. So bear with me. Okay guys, so I want to talk to you here about why I put the small end of the log towards the saw head. And I'm not saying in any way that you have to do this. I'm just going to tell you why I do it, okay? This is the stump end here. And that other end, which is smaller, is the end I'm going to work from when I cut. Now, so let me explain this to you. I put the log on there, and then the first thing I do is I measure the diameter. So you can see this piece of wood here is just from the way the tree grew. I'm not going to measure that. That says the log is 15 inches, but this isn't any good because it's not part of the round log, okay? Now, just because you measure something, like I measure here 13, and over here I'm measuring 12 on the opposite, you know, measuring the opposite way. So I'm going to go for the smaller number, which is 12. That'll probably work a little better, although this entire log is actually crooked. So chances of getting an exact 12-inch, or, you know, trying to say that this log is straight 12 inches down may or may not work. But we're starting at this end. So anyway, 12 inches in diameter. So what we do with that then is I come and look at this, and there's a number of ways to figure the cant out. You can do whatever you want. I look at this, so I see number 12 gives me an 8.5 inch cant. Okay, so let me show you what I'm thinking. So when I read that, this is what I see. I see this cant coming out of this log. Now, if you notice, I'm into the bark here. I'm touching the bark there. I'm just about touching it there. Might move it a little bit. But if I were to mark the outside edges, put this dog on here, I can cut wherever I put these pencil lines, and I am going to have an 8.5 inch cant right at this spot. Okay? So like this part of it doesn't really count because it's just a weird part of the log that's screwed there. Alright, so that's how I start. Now, you can make these if you want to. I never use these. I make them only to show other people what I'm thinking. So if they see me put something there, they can understand the cant I'm getting out of there. Now, as soon as you know the cant, like you can see this cant is 8.5 inches, you can automatically figure out the length, or automatically figure out the board feet of wood. It's not perfect, but it's very close. So 8.5 times 8.5 times 96 divided by 144 will give you the board feet of lumber that you're going to have there. Okay? So that's what you can do. You can figure it out that way if you want to. If you don't want to, if you have a better way of figuring it out, do whatever you want. I'm just saying you can come up pretty much with the board feet from that. And that's, you know, just a rough to give you an idea of where you stand. Okay, so now just keep imagining that this is staying there. This is what I want out of this end of the log. However, if I go down to this end of the log and I leave it laying where it is, and I'll just give you an example here. Now just hang on. When I go up to this end and I put this cant on there, I end up with coming down from the top of the log 2 inches to get this cant. I can't go any more than 2 inches. If I do, I lose it. So let's see what happens here. If I put 2 here and I put the cant there, you can see that it looks like I'm going to get the same 8-inch cant out of that. However, sometimes, like you can see I'm a little close to this side, so I may want to shift this over or shift it down to be in the center of the tree at this end. What goofs me up, and I think it goofs up a lot of people, is when you put the big end of the log here at the opposite end, and you figure, well, I'm going to put this in the middle and mark it. You can mark it all you want, and it'll cut straight. It depends on how you set it up. But then you've got to do something with the opposite end to make the things work right. So in other words, with the log laying as it is right now, my blade would cut not 2 inches down from this. Let me measure this up here. My saw blade is going to cut 13 inches from the bottom of the log. So if you look here, 13 is right here, okay, 14, 15. It's about pretty much the same because the top of this log, the way I have it, is fairly straight. So I can come down here 2 inches, okay, and that's where my saw blade's going to come out. The same spot, basically the same spot as I go in over at that end. But because the log is wider and not exactly a circle, it's more like an oblong this way, I may not get the same width of wood that I get up there. In other words, I might not get the 8.5 inch cant at 2 inches down. Okay, so there I am there. So I will get that here. What I'm getting at is that you have to line up this square at that end and this end to be able to get the wood cut through the center of the log. So if I put this at that end and I measure what it is from the top down, especially once it's dogged, you want to dog it before you do this, and also set the toe height for it. So in other words, that end down there is roughly 13 inches. If I measure this here, this one's 14 inches, so it's only an inch. Now some of them are a lot worse than that. Sometimes you can have like 24 inches down here and 20 up there. 4 inches off is a lot of trying to guess. So basically you're trying to get the center of this tree, which is actually lower than the 2 inches. It would be a little lower than that. You're trying to get this center of this lined up with the center of that end. You do that by setting setting that end up there first. Get a measurement from the sawmill bunk rail up to whatever line you're going to cut at. And then come down here and measure from the bunk rail up and put a mark on this at whatever that same distance is at that end. So in other words, if I measure up here to the top of the tree, if I measure up and it's 13 inches and I'm going to cut at 11 inches, okay, that means I have to be able to measure up here 11 inches, and that's where my cut's going to be. So just to give you an idea, 11 inches is about right there. So you can see that that cut, because of the way the tree has a little bit of a bow in it, is going to be lower than the 2 inches. It's going to be about 3.5 inches low compared to what it would be if I, cut without adjusting the toe board on it, or the towing of the log. So I'm hoping you're understanding what I'm saying here. You need to line up this square from that end to this square at this end and make sure that the saw blade cuts through that area. That's what your name of the game is. So again, looking at this end here, for me, it's a lot harder to take a big end and line it up with the small end up there. Not that you can't do it, it's just harder. You can do it. So if I look at the center of this tree, let me just put a little X on this thing here, where the center of this is. Okay, so the center of this tree is right about here, or the cant is where my finger is. So if I put that right in the center of the tree, you can see that it's lower than 2 inches. It's fairly close to this bottom end here, and you might end up running out of wood before you get from that end down to here. So you may have to adjust this a little bit, like maybe you want to bring it up. Okay, you can do that. The only thing is whatever you have down there, wherever your top line of cut is, when you have the cant figured out, 8.5 inch cant, wherever this 8.5 inch cant's going to be, that line is where the saw has to come out. So if I put a line across here, the saw has to come out there if I'm going to cut the tree in the center, let's just say. And it doesn't matter what I'm not saying you have to cut it in the center. I'm not saying that you can't cut straight through there and just try and get the 8-inch cant out of it any way you can. What I'm saying is if you go up here and cut 11 inches up from the bunk, and you come down here and 11 inches up does not give you an 8.5 inch cant anymore because of the way you cut through the log, you lose lumber right away. Okay, you're taking away from that 8.5 inch cant. Now you guys who have been watching my channel for a while, you know that if the log is bent like this one is, this log has a bend in it, you see it there in the middle? This log is bent somewhere right here, but it's not bent real bad, probably about 1 inch. So that's not too bad. But if you don't keep your eyes open to all those things, you'll end up having some problems when it comes to getting your cant out of that. So you want an 8.5 inch cant from the opposite end, which is easy to figure out, because all you got to do is measure it. It's 13 or 12 inches. I get the cant size is 8.5, so I can measure up even distances to give me where that 8.5 is. Like I say, 2 here and 2 down there gives me what I need, roughly. All right, so I got 2 inches down. I can make my first cut through here. All I'm saying is you may have to pick that end of the log up to make that 2-inch cut to make it come out down here where you want it to. I'm not saying that it should be 2 inches from here down. I'm saying that it's probably not going to be 2 inches. It's probably going to be something more. Like right there looks more like 3 inches. So anyway, that's how you would use something like this to give you an example of where you should do your cut. You want to try and find the best lumber that's in here. I know that this is cut at an angle. This actually needs to be cut back here about 6 inches to give me an 8-foot log or an 8-foot cant. But you know, once you mark this, you want to make sure that the line is off the bunk the same distance that line is up there off the bunk rail, because if it's not, the saw is not going to cut through the line, and you need it to cut through that line at that end and this line at this end wherever you put it, so that you end up with a nice straight log. I'll show you this when it's not snowing when I go to cut it. I just don't want to cut now because I don't want to have to try and clear off the snow that's gotten icy on this pile here to be able to stack this wood. Alright, so that's part of how you use a cant pattern like this one to be able to figure out what to do. And sometimes the trees are, instead of being round, they're actually, you know, on an oval, and you might get, instead of an 8-inch cant, you might get an 8 by 10-inch cant. It all depends on what the tree grew like. There's no rules to this other than the math will tell you what the story is as long as you follow the math. If you don't follow the math, then you're not going to know the real story. So that's why I cut from the small end, because when I'm up at the small end, think of it as aiming a rifle or something. If I'm up here and I'm looking through the tree with the blade has to be, like, let's say the other end of the tree is, let's say the square could be, you know, a couple different areas. You want to line up the tree at that end so you have the same thing. To me, it's easier to work from the small end to do that. I'm not saying that you have to. If you work for me, you're going to, because that's the way I want it. But if you work for yourself, I'm saying you can do whatever you want to do, but you have to have this understanding of what I'm saying about moving the cant to wherever it has to be to get a nice piece of wood out of the tree. Okay guys, so I hope that helps you understand how I line up the log and why I pick it up sometimes I don't. Now right now that's not sitting on my toe board at this upper end up here. If I want to, I can either push the log up that way further, or I can just pick it up and throw a 2x4 underneath it. It doesn't matter how you do it. Okay, that's not the issue. The issue is that you know where you're going to come out of this end with your saw blade. That's what you need to know. Okay, you know where it's going in, but you need to know where it's coming out before you cut it. Because if you don't, you're liable to end up without the 8.5-inch cant that you want.